Time now to talk, as we do every week, to our executive coach, Harold Hillman. Morning to you, Harold.
Good morning, Mel. I'm enjoying your show this morning very much.
Fabulous. Now, before we get into talking about 5 things to focus on when coaching someone, you were in New York, because we'd obviously been talking today about commemorating the 9/11, 20 years ago the attacks were. You were in New York on that morning.
That's right. I've been in a very reflective space over the last couple of weeks there. I had just moved down from Connecticut to Manhattan. I was working for Prudential Financial in New York, and so I decided I wanted to just move. I wanted to finally move to Manhattan, and I had just landed 5 days into it, and then 9/11, and it's just really put me in a reflective space over the last couple of weeks, particularly in watching the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, realizing that event was the catalyst for that all, and 2 decades, which will be, two chapters that America will really want to reflect on.
Yeah. Can you remember, how did you feel that morning? How did it impact you being in New York?
I was in shock. I was in shock. I got off of a train, and there I was. I only lived about 5 miles from Ground Zero. And so then I was nowhere close to the devastation, and I immediately made my way back to my apartment. And of course, life changed for us all then. But I went into shock. It was something that there was no playbook for it. I just remember just retreating inward and really thinking about the fact that this scenario would change how we live and lead our lives.
And what was it like in the days and weeks following living in New York? What was the feeling?
It was really a sad. Time. I kept in my living room. I pulled my blinds down because my blinds looked right down towards towards Wall Street and the financial district of New York. And so, I kept my blinds down for a long time, Mel. It felt like weeks, because whether it was daytime or nighttime, there was just a lot of focus down in that area there. You would see it it was such an eerie feeling that first couple of days, that first day, that second day after, the third day, walking out and seeing Times Square empty. Empty. It was unreal, unlike anything. Eventually, it was about 6 months afterwards when New York started to pick up its vibe a bit more, and people were more in a positive space or so. But yeah, it was a daunting few months.
I can't even imagine what it must have been like. Well, thank you for your memories, Harold. Really appreciate it. Now, what we're actually going to be talking about today, what we're going to talk about, but I really wanted to hear your reflections on that, is how you go about coaching someone. You always need to coach somebody at some stage. And what are the things that you really need to be thinking about when you are coaching someone?
I often ask leaders people who lead teams to think about the distinction between 4 hats that they will wear. You will wear the hat of leader, and that means that you are taking a person or a team towards a future that they choose to buy into. So there's a lot of vision and inspiration when you're wearing your leadership hat. You really invigorate people. Then there is your manager hat. And your manager hat is more day-to-day. It requires you to be across protocols and processes and procedures, and how are people tracking around specific tasks. When you're managing someone, you're a bit more hands-on. The third hat is your mentoring hat. and that is it can be very formal or sometimes quite informal, and that is where you're passing along wisdom and perspective, particularly in terms of how a person might want to unpack the rest of their life in a mentorship. And then finally, there's the coaching hat. The coaching hat is one where you are trying to help a person go up a learning curve, and in the process of going up that learning curve, helping them to build both capability and confidence. And so it's a very distinctive hat that many of us will put on, whether you be a team leader or even if you're a peer of another person who may be going up a learning curve, and you may drop in to have a conversation with them, and the conversation feels like it might be a coaching conversation.
So you've got your coaching hat on. What do you need to be thinking about?
5 things you really want to think about. First of all, in terms of pushing through the notion of pushing through an obstacle. So get the person to focus on the prize, the bigger picture, the fact that there is something to be gained on the other side of this, even if it's where they want to be in their own career 10 years from now. Then you're going to have to sit in this chair and that chair and then that one. And so what that means is that you're going to have to be building different skills. And so get the person to not necessarily think about the challenge as an obstacle, but more as an opportunity, focusing on the bigger picture prize. And then you want to prepare people for stretch, Mel, and that is truly on a learning curve where people are in stretch. In physics, there's an optimal zone for any object that's in stretch. And on this stretch continuum, there are 2 extremes. One of those is understretch, and one of those is overstretch. An optimal stretch sits right in the middle. So when you are coaching someone, you don't want them to be understretched, where you are not pushing into the challenge hard enough. And you certainly don't want them to be overstretched in terms of where it may, in fact, be causing a bit more stress, particularly if it's something that a person doesn't have a natural aptitude for. So keeping your eye on making sure that the person is climbing that learning curve, but is not under stress. And the third thing you want to do is, again, reframing the hurdles. Optimism is really important when you're coaching another person. It really is. And what you're trying to convey to them is we can do this attitude, can-do attitude around being able to learn a new skill or work your way through a negotiation or whatever the challenge may be. Reframing often is, we've talked about this before, Mel, in that sense of optimism being a huge component of resilience. The fourth thing you want to do with a person when you're coaching them is to support them. I call it support with straight talk. And that is meaning just be frank, be candid. Don't beat around the bush. One of my favorite leaders, when I think in the business context, was Jack Welch in the States, who was the former chair and CEO of GE. And he believed that it was an ethical obligation on the part of a leader to be candid with a direct report, someone who's on their team, when it comes to feedback and being able to help them see the reality and also to be able to lift their capability. And so just straight talk means just basically laying it out as it is. And if you do that well, it is received in a constructive way. And then finally, Mel, the fifth one is lock in the learning. And that is, once a person does get some traction, whether it be, let's just say you're trying to help someone learn better negotiation skills, or you've got someone who's been very technically oriented around finance or numbers, and you're trying to build their capability in that relationship zone. It is helpful once people do get traction to actually get them then to start helping and supporting others in that realm there. When you have to teach something, and when you have to teach something, there's a different connection to it, a visceral connection to it.
And those are the 5 tips. Harold Hillman, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure talking with you. Those are 5 tips to when you put your coaching hat on, what you need to do. And you can find those 5 tips in his new book called Empathy, which is out right now.